Welcome to the Toekenz Podcast. We're so happy to welcome our guest, Maureen Mauk, with us today. Hi to Jeff first. I don't want to ignore you. My co-host, Jeff Allen.
Nobody puts Jeff in the corner. Hi, Iris. How are you? So happy to be here. So happy to meet you, Maureen.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Iris. It's great to be here.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. We know you, and we're so happy to have you, but our audience doesn't know you, so would you mind just introducing yourself?
My name is Maureen Mauk. I am a Ph.D. candidate right now, pursuing my doctorate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Almost done, just writing a dissertation at this point, or wrapping it up. And what I study and kind of my specialty is communication, media cultural studies, and specifically the world of responsibility, censorship, parents, children's media. And I come to my graduate work as like a very long, twisted path, which is the best way to be I don't think I could have done this 10, 20 years ago, but I'm a former television executive. I worked as a censor for Fox Broadcasting for a decade. And also more recently, and how we met, Iris, is, and Jeff, you were there at some point too, worked at Mattel, the kids' toy company, overseeing all kinds of fun entities, from Hot Wheels to Monster High, making sure that our commercials and our content were safe, and safe for kids, safe for regulatory standards. And so I was part of the standards and practices department within the regulatory department. And essentially I'm a censor. I was like the no person. I was the fun police, as my husband calls it.
Yeah, you hear stories about like standards and practices. I mean, you do on like TV shows and stuff where like they go through the script or something and they give you your quota on curse words, how many you can use, which ones, blah, blah, blah. So that was the job?
Yeah, that was the job. I mean, just a couple, case examples, going toe to toe with Simon Cowell about, how we're going to handle voting on the X Factor, or, which songs a person can sing, and why, a mention of, everything from product integration. X Factor was sponsored by Pepsi and I think Ford. And so therefore like a mention of, take my Chevy to the levee in a Don McLean song could be problematic. And then on MasterChef and MasterChef Junior with Fox Broadcasting is, making sure kids feel safe and protected, and that, how are we responsibly doing a competitive television show with children, and things like who will be kicked off. And we made sure that there was never just one child ever singled out. There was always like two that would leave a show at the same time. And, there was times where an oven broke. So the competition stops. We all start over to make sure everybody has the same opportunity to, create a great souffle for a competition. And then I've done a ton of scripted programs too, everything from John Stamos' Grandfather to Family Guy, Simpsons, working on Bones, working on a ton of different fun shows to deal with the blood and the gore and the violence and the language, sexual depictions, just racial depictions. And then because I really wanted to try out something a little different, we moved into the children's realm. And it definitely paired with me having kids myself. So I currently have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. And, it is a game changer where you realize there's this whole other world of content. And I think this onus of responsibility where it bounces back and forth between the parent, the regulator, the content creator, the producer, and the precedent of like who's in charge. And actually that's the title of my dissertation, is called The Grown-Ups in the Room. But we're considering like just decades of responsibility of who was in charge, everything from radio up to parental controls and the platformized television now.
Right.
Yeah.
So certainly like in the days of broadcast, like as all of that stuff was born and began to evolve, a critically important job, right? Safeguarding our children, obviously hugely important. But today, with access to everything, all the information, the internet, kids with their iPads, fair to say that it is more important now than it has ever been?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think the first thing I'd say is yes, like that is the feeling in our world that this is more, never has it been more important to protect our children and navigate, the technology at hand. But honestly, like I go back to the archives in the 1930s of how NBC handled this crazy new technology at the time, which was radio broadcast. And the exact same language that you just said was being printed and discussed in Congress during huge discussions of violence and broadcasting, and how will we handle this, and what will happen, and is this going to replace books, and shouldn't children just be outside, not inside, listening to the radio? So I think one of my arguments, and always kind of a deeper seated philosophy, is we're constantly, as parents and as content creators, like navigating what's next on technology, and then just making sure that people feel supported on it. But at the same time, like we're getting inundated right now. From a parent perspective, yeah, there's a lot more to deal with than just 20 channels on the radio, or the blessed days of like 1950s golden era television, where there was just three, if you were so lucky as to get all three stations. So there's a lot more to navigate, and I feel like parents in particular feel like they're just constantly like dodging one thing to do the next, and it's almost sort of like that, like Masters of the Universe, He-Man, like shield, like, oh my gosh, like, oh, and then the kid's cell phone, but now what is Snapchat, and like TikTok comes, and and even I think even in the standards and practices that, especially at Mattel, we notice this, like, and every day a new platform was kind of emerging, and how do we as a company, or do we want to play in that sandbox, or do we need to pull back? So yeah, it's making sure that these regulatory standards, even if they're not there yet, that the companies are doing well upon the users, in this case, oftentimes parents and kids. And then just like, I think, like, one thing I would say, we standards and practices people have been using this term since the 50s, but the conscience of the company. It's like that, thinking about the ethics of why are we doing this, and is this okay? And sometimes it's, what's nice is, and even as I kind of consult these days, when I'm not like rooted in one particular company all the time, is thinking about, I don't have a direct horse in the game all the time, or in the race, horse in the race, right? Like, so I can actually think, like, I didn't write the content, I didn't edit it, I didn't film it, and I'm not paying for it. So therefore I can sort of like think a little bit outside the box to say, like, how does this reflect upon you? And how are people going to feel about this? And I think my specialty has always been thinking about it from the parent's perspective, both like in the actual reality of how will it affect them, but then also how does it make them feel, and enabling them, who are also just trying to enable and do the best upon their kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. How do you think tech and kids media companies can do better?
There's some good things happening. And so I think there was kind of a Wild West even 5-10 years ago, where kind of with the YouTube, as companies saw, like, oh my gosh, kids have all pivoted from watching Saturday morning cartoons to moving over to this platform called YouTube, which had been around for a while, but it took a while for, I think, the cell phones and like iPads to really enable access to it in that way. And then I think, like, there was this moment where all the big brands and major toy companies, and then just kind of pop up influencers, which we now call them, but essentially YouTube families and kids, were saying, like, we can make millions if we just put unboxing videos and just the day in the life sort of stuff. And that that has all since been very much clamped down, and has, whether you're a major toy brand, or whether you're a mom and dad and child who seeks to find fame on YouTube by playing with toys, you can't just sell products to kids on a platform that is age 13 and up anymore. So YouTube and some of the other major streamers have done a much better job of offering better parental controls, of protecting kids' privacy, of taking away some of the access, whether it be, the like, subscribe, comments below type, stuff. Also keeping kids within one place rather than sending them, out of one walled garden of, YouTube kids to then be like, oh, and now find us on Instagram, and popping them into 3 different platforms that are all, not necessarily privacy protected for kids. So already there's been a lot of really big developments. And unfortunately, some of those came because I think small and large, some companies were taking advantage and just, kind of looking to not like from a nefarious point of view, like, we will get to your children, but just trying to get in front of this new marketscape and also in front of kids who are a great, demographic of consumers. So a lot has already been done. There's more to come. I mean, I think in California right now, they just recently introduced legislation, which is not to say it will like get passed exactly as is, but essentially thinking about some of the legislation that's been done in the United Kingdom, for example, it's the age appropriate design code legislation. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, tell us. But Jeff's just shaking his head, so tell us.
Age appropriate design code. This online safety policies that are being built into domestic and international and it will be codified by law is the idea. And basically, around the world, governments are starting to require that companies do more moderation of harmful content. There's still this question, especially in, a First Amendment free speech country such as America, that we hope to continue, that we want to protect free speech, obviously, at the same time. So there's always this very delicate balance of when are we moderating and when are we protecting free speech and protecting children. But there are some things that are being done as far as implementing age verification, identification tools with respect to users' privacy, transparency measures in general, just not being so opaque about what's happening on the back end, or under the thing of like, well, we don't want to expose trade secrets type thing. So a lot of it is just making sure it's very much in keeping with the UK's age appropriate design code, which started in September 21. And it's a little bit different than like the GDPR, but essentially it's like some examples is checking the age of a kid before they come to your site or download your app or your game, switching off any kind of geolocation services, not doing like the nudge techniques to encourage kids to buy more or give away more data, and just a high level of privacy by default, which is, I think, like one thing that Iris, I've really admired with the plans for your company, is that it's you have to opt out rather than opt in. And you can talk about that more.
So much of our dialogue around parental controls comes down to what's important for the company to be corporately conscious of, and what is on the responsibility of the parents. And historically, so much of the onus of media controls has been on the parents. And that's a lot. It's a lot for parents to manage. And so the idea that the company has a responsibility, that we've like defaulted to the most conservative sets of controls and permissions, is just one way of saying, okay, we're going to take on some of that responsibility and burden of moderating the kids' media experience.
Right. Yeah. And that makes a big difference to just think, as a parent, I'm going to put on like my parent hat for a minute. When you download an app onto my kids, we have one iPad, and we generally try to keep YouTube just on the TV for them. But what do I need to know? What are all like the secret things that they're using? So if the idea is that everything is automatically as locked down as possibly can be to start with, and instead they need permission to go that extra mile, like that takes a lot of the burden off the parent immediately. Like you're operating the safest possible conditions. Eventually, sure, if you want to let them message with a particular friend, okay, like we'll do that. But that it's not a given to start with, versus what do we always talk about, like the candy aisle at a grocery store?
Oh yeah, the impulse buy. lane at the very end.
Yeah, you know how like there's some, maybe it's not even as much of a thing anymore because people don't, pandemic, we kind of stopped taking our kids shopping, but like there was like the grocery store aisle that didn't sell candy bars like in the aisle for a long time. And this idea that for once a parent could just like cruise through and do the thing and not have to constantly be saying no. And I think like it's nice to just actually just be the pleasant parent sometimes and not always be the no person, like the fun police like me. So the idea is if you just give them, this is the thing, and then if a parent chooses to grab the candy bar and add something in, great, like later we do that, but it's not constantly putting the parents like on the defense.
So, what is the difference between what you're describing with these new design regulations and like COPA compliance, which I have heard of?
Mm-hmm. COPA is pretty small, and I am not an attorney, so I can't speak to it as well as I think some others can. But COPA
COPA
is
being, of
very,
course,
yeah,
COPA
so it's
being, of course, the children's online
the Children's
privacy
Online
and protection.
Privacy
Act.
protection. Yeah.
And this is introduced by Senator Ed Markey in Massachusetts years ago to start something. Let's stop just like blatantly taking data from children and using it in their kind of their legal, their human, their cultural footprint. For years to come. Like, let's stop collecting all the information about a child that's using this. So the idea is that when you are in a COPA compliant game or app, is that the company is not using your every keystroke and move or name or age or birth date or location, and not only just using it for their own edification and market strategies, but actually then selling it to potential other larger clients that all of a sudden they're getting postcards in the mail. Just that there's so much information that and there's still a lot happening with that. I was reading about the college admissions. They can mark how many times you have visited, and they do. This is not they do mark how many times you have visited their website before you actually put in your college application to know how serious you are. Have you been looking at the website for Cornell admissions for, and not, this is just an example, for the past 3 years, or did you just look it up yesterday before you submitted your application? So things like that, even like that can follow you, they can make major changes in your potential outcome as a adult. And obviously with job applications and just even what jobs you are served as possibilities if you were to do a Google search. Sophia Noble wrote a great book about that called The Algorithms of Oppression. But so there's a lot of amazing data points that can really help a company or an institution or a hiring organization make decisions and like kind of thin slice who they want to hire, who they want to bring on, or what's the right thing. But like a kid doesn't deserve that. Like they're still in the process, and they're there to have fun. They're there to learn. Sometimes they're on a site because they happen to be, looking at it along with a friend. So this protects them, and that's the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. This is thinking the other legislation coming out and what the UK and other countries are doing more is thinking about the larger, like the overall infrastructure of a site or of a game or of a platform. And so and honestly, this legislation that was introduced is just a week old, but Iris, you've been thinking about this for a year. So good job.
So, like as a parent, when I'm like vetting applications for my kids, they come to me, they bring me the iPad or whatever, and they say, I want this. And they're already on the App Store page, and they just want me to click the button, put in the password, and download the app. So as a parent in this situation, like what should I be looking for to understand at a glance, or even with a little more research, like what am I looking for to ensure that it's safe for my kid, that they are listening to these things and designing with families and kids in mind?
It's hard to kind of make those like knee-jerk,
I'm struggling,
split section just decisions, because I struggle with it too. Like and the honest answer is always at the most inopportune time, or you're like the one time we really kind of give our kids full-fledged Amazon Fire or whatever kind of opportunities. It's like we're getting on a plane. So it's usually the night before. And then we're like, no, I gotta pack. Like, sure, you can have whatever this shark munching eating thing is. Like, okay. But the things that I would say, there's two kind of frameworks to think about it. Is one, like the little bit more meta, and which is more fun, and this is not what you have time for the night before getting on a flight. It's like, is this good for them? Like, is this something, sometimes there's just time killers. Like, there's like, my kids have a game that they just shave Santa's face, like it's like a cute little thing, and they give Santa Claus haircuts. Like, that's not going to kill anybody. They're not learning anything, but that's okay. Like, that's fine. Like, this is truly fun for them.
Is
And
Santa
that's
really Santa without the beard, though? There's something just weird about this.
and you can do other things, like you can decorate them, but like, yeah, that's literally all it is. And that's great. Like, sometimes that's just nicer to like, okay, this is a no-brainer. And then there's the cost. Like, what is it going to cost you as a parent? Like, how much is the download? But the free type of apps can be more problematic because there's hidden cost, and like, okay, you get the free game, but then you're going to get hit up 10,000 more times by the kid will to buy into the next level, or have some sort of other access,
Or ads.
obviously. So the ads, god, the pop-up ads. And then sometimes, like, if I'm actually like really putting a lot of thought into it, it's, what do I want them to learn? What do I want them to get out of this? And those are like the meaningful apps that I think parents for the first time really leaned into, especially in a pandemic, where those who were probably, and I think I should mention this, is part of my research is speaking to parents here in the US, kind of across different socioeconomic statuses, everything from Alaska to Hawaii, about their screen time usage and kind of their belief systems pre-pandemic, in the heart of things, like what's a day to day, and then kind of hopes for moving forward in, air quotes, like our post-pandemic society. Hopefully, we'll see.
The new normal.
Whatever the new normal would be. And, so a lot of that has evolved, and I can speak to that further. But getting back to the point is, I think there is something where you go, parents who maybe were kind of shy on ever even giving their kids screens to start with, which was me. All of a sudden they're issued 2 Google Chromebooks from school and an iPad, and we were in this world. And I had a kindergartner and a first grader at that point. Not the world I wanted to play in, but this is what we had to do. Mm-hmm. And I was still teaching courses virtually, and there's still a lot happening, and we're both trying to like work and do these things, and we had to fill their day with more screens. And then I put some thought into it. Like, what can they get out of this? Like, how can they, one, connect like socially in a way that helps them feel like they're not just, and helps me feel like they're not just sitting there with the screen, and 2, could they freaking learn something while we're doing this?
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about this screen time thing, because obviously there is a recommended amount of time, but there's also the importance of defining what screen time actually is. Can you help us with this? Like, what actually is screen time, and what is the recommended amount of screen time?
I mean, the entire idea of, I think, the entire idea of trying to decipher what screen time is and how much to regulate, I think the general understanding is we throw it out the window, because how do you possibly, and I think this is where a lot of kind of that like cognitive dissonance came from early on, is the American Academy of Pediatrics has for a very long time instituted a no screen time at all for kids 2 and under, and then no more than 2 hours per day for children in general. And then we hit the pandemic. And first of all, nobody was ever doing that to start with. And I'm sure you've like get that little laminated checklist at your kid's annual well-being, well-baby check, and like, how many hours of screen time? Like, yeah, under 2. Sure. I don't know. But that wasn't always the case even then. And same for me. And I study this, but like Saturday mornings were like, go nuts. You carte blanche, watch cartoons. And I hearken that back to like my days of growing up. watching like traditional Saturday morning cartoons. And I enjoyed that as a kid, and I'm sure my parents enjoyed us making couch forts and leaving them alone for 4 hours, and so we continue this tradition. And there's a lot of nostalgia built into decisions around screen time by American parents. And then I would say this research is now continuing internationally. So the same kind of set of qualitative interview, like hour-long interview questions, are being repeated now in Colombia, China, Korea, UK, Australia, Canada, Denmark. So we're kind of getting more data points to see like where like those cultural and different country articulations came and where it's very much the same. So screen time, there was this 2-hour thing, and then pandemic hits. What are you going to do? Like, does FaceTiming grandma and grandpa who you now can't see to keep them safe count? If you put them in front of your phone for an hour, is that an hour of screen time? Like,
Right.
Does remote schooling count?
Right. So there's 4 hours. Does PE, jump rope lessons with your physical education teacher at the public school remotely count? Like, no, I don't think so. What about when you're like zooming in to look at the Philadelphia Zoo and see the new eagles being born on, kind of their zoo camera? Like, does that count? Like, maybe, like, I don't know. Like, and I think where the chips, and then also there was some kind of conflicting news articles coming out kind of early in the pandemic. The University of Michigan, I have to, I can't remember her name. She was the one that actually like wrote the screen time rules for the APA. She basically said, throw them out the window. Like, don't worry, parents, just do what you got to do to survive. And then a year and a half later in the New York Times, there was this big article with this kind of like dimly lit, holding a screen photo of a boy and his parents kind of hovering over him, saying that they lost their kid to Fortnite and the regret that they, gave them so much screen time. And it was just really kind of on this dark, sad side of like worst case scenario of kids and screen time. And they quoted this researcher again, this expert in the field on kind of children and screens, about saying like, I kind of regret that we said throw it out the window because I didn't think the pandemic was going to last so long. Right. So what do you do? So then parents are kind of hearing like, we're constantly being asked to pivot and adjust about what's the right thing. And ultimately, I think the right thing is finding that balance and deciding, yes, if you're having to zoom into a school or a classroom meeting, like it's probably not like your typical screen time, but you still want to give kids that opportunity to walk away from a screen, do something else, socialize. And I think a lot of parents found that even just within their own families, depending on age and just the kind of like genetic like makeup of their kids, some kids do okay with vegging out for a couple hours in front of a show or on a iPad playing a game, and some like they would pay the price afterward because they would just kind of have meltdowns. It would take another hour or two to kind of reacquaint them to society at home after they took away the screen. So it's a lot of just internal adjustment for a parent and the decision makers, which again is tough.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying quality should play a big role in this consideration too, rather than just like the quantity. So you need to like, is it quality screen time versus just, mindless screen time? In addition to that, balance is super important. I've even heard the opposite side of the argument now. I've talked with parents who are saying that they restrict so much screen time or restrict the tablets, the access to all that stuff, and they feel like they're putting their child at a deficit in a world that is trending in a direction of becoming more and more digital, that now they're behind their cohort that is very native and can do all these things within this digital world. And their kids have been held at arm's length from it for the first 5-6 years of their life. And all of a sudden, it's foreign to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely a balance just with anything. And I think like that is a time tested, going back to early technology. I mean, even when there was like zoetropes and pop-up puzzle books in the Victorian ages, there was this conflict of like this technology, these games are taking away from our kids learning the piano, so this, not even just with broadcasting and kind of the digital side of internet that has, come upon us in the past couple decades, but like, you got to just make sure you're giving your kids some sort of like healthy balance. And I actually think another big thing, and this is very kind of emerging research, but some of those connections about, and I think it's a huge stress factor for parents, social media and kids and depression. And there's a huge connection that we haven't totally properly researched yet, but just it's a lot of it's just sleep. Where are we taking away? So like if you're taking, yes, kids need to get out and get exercise and they need to socialize. But another just issue is that phones are, being taken to bed. And, for a teenager in those years that you like, I have done the doomsday scrolling myself where you're just like, oh, let me just set my alarm and let me check Twitter. Oh, don't go down that road. And to some extent, kids are doing that too. And it takes an hour of sleep away from, my own self. And this is, I think like gravely affecting kids. And this is very kind of new. There was an article in the Atlantic about it actually 2 days ago, but some interesting research coming out to make those connections, that it's not so much always just the content or just the quality, but it's a balance again of finding the right things for your kid. And I think making decisions, even just one-on-one basis about what do they need, and then just knowing when to kind of say, okay, like let's back it up a little bit. But that assumes a parent at home, that assumes somebody right there with them. And we all know that's not how screens work either. Whether you're like a mom or dad cooking dinner and you give your kids 20 minutes TV time so that you can actually focus for a minute and get something on a table, or whether you're giving your middle school child a cell phone because you're a single parent and you're at work until 7 p.m. and you need to make sure they get off the bus safely. So there's a lot of other reasons kids have screens besides just like a mom sitting there like, let's go learn about this thing today. Let's check in on the eagle's nest at the Philadelphia Zoo. Like there's a lot of screens that are being used unsupervised. And, as not necessarily as just an electronic babysitter, but as a safety net, as a lifeline sometimes. So, those are things to incorporate too.
Yeah, I feel like it's really clear that this is just a really complex issue. And that's why your experience, Maureen, and your cutting edge research and your context as a mom has been just so valuable to me, to us, as we've been kind of navigating very uncharted waters when it comes to not only the screen time and device issues, but Web3, metaverse, DeFi, NFTs, right? This is such a brave new world that not only our families, but our kids are entering into. I feel like it's just, it's so important to be mindful about these things in the uncharted waters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've introduced me to a lot of these uncharted waters. Like I was still just living in this nice TV app game side. And, when you're like, what do you know about the dojo? It's like, I know nothing. So it's been, and you're right. Like Jeffy, and what you're saying is these are new places to go. You don't want your kid to be completely, I wouldn't advocate for like raising your child screen free. Because that doesn't set them up for success in society either. Is the ultimate understanding is that we will continue kind of like moving and using screens. And I think I've probably fought that hard, like, personally. And it took a pandemic to go like, all right, I guess my kids are going to learn how to navigate a Chromebook at kindergarten. And parents still, like a lot of the response in kind of like mid-pandemic was, I just want my kid to bring home a piece of paper that they wrote and did something on and show it to me. Like I miss that. I miss just like, show me something you did tangible. So we remember this, and I think kids still ultimately are drawn to that, but it doesn't mean that we can't play in, the metaverse, and that we can't kind of like introduce kids to this world that is happening, and whether we like it or not. But there's good things, like I think about kids aren't learning cursive anymore, but like then, and I argue like, well, how would they do a signature? And a college student, like an undergrad, laughed like, I never sign anything, it's all digital. digital cigarettes.
DocuSign. Yeah.
Like, good Lord, like this is like, well, how would you
Yeah.
look? And like Venmo, and like there's, this is, I'm so old school in comparison, and I think I'm like hip and trendy, and then my
Yeah.
family reminds me that I'm the fun police.
It's true though. Digital is replacing physical everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring up such a good point. Like it just went in my head as you were saying, like, I miss it when kids bring home something from school and like, let me see what you did today. And you hold it, you look at it, and I love those moments too. And I'm never like, I take it seriously, right? I give like the best feedback when I get that thing in my hands, and I'm like so interested in it, even if it's a terrible chicken scratch drawing, right? You try hard to find the redeeming characteristics and let your kid know that they're on the right path. And as I'm thinking that, it just occurred to me, like every single day, my kid comes to me with his iPad and tries to tell me about the milestones that he crossed in Roblox or whatever he's doing. And I'm so quick to dismiss it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's wrong. He's coming to me to show me like the productivity of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't I jump into that with him and, get involved and give him the feedback that he's probably so craving as a kid? I'm going to really rethink the next time that he does that.
There you go. And actually, I'm the same, 100%. Like, okay. And I notice even my kids are they're creators. Like they want to make, like they're domino toppling right now and setting up all these cool colored dominoes to then design them, and it knocks over a Dixie cup and a marble. But then in their head, they're making a video. They're making a YouTube for it. And, and sometimes like I have put like 2 on my YouTube privately for them, but like they're creating. And my first reaction is like, oh, this is so terrible. This means they're watching so much YouTube that they want this, and they can only think that way. And then I realized, I was reflecting on growing up, I very much remember this day, but I for some reason I was watching a lot of like PBS gardening shows. This is like circa 1986 or so, and cooking shows. And I remember taking a basket and walking into my neighbor's garden and picking all of their green beans and the repercussions that followed as I like pillaged the neighbor's garden. But in my head, I was making a gardening show, and I was kind of talking and narrating what we were doing. It might have been like even like based off of a Sesame Street skit, now that I think about it. But like, so I was already like performing that, so we're always kind of performing. And, my daughter's holding a sign that says TV, like getting me when I'm most vulnerable. So I think kids naturally do that. And I think we always have done that to some extent. We're influenced by the influencers, but it can be on a different screens in different ways. But yeah, it's interesting.
That's so funny. It just goes to show we've always been doing the things that this generation is doing. It's just a different level and maybe a different access point, right? But those are just very human responses to media in any form, it seems like. And I think that the balances that we strike are just also unique and individual. Like, for example, another one of Cryptos and Kitties consultants has a balance in extremes where he is heavily involved in the world of decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, right? That's his like job. And on the other hand, his like life's passion and hobby is like survivalist, like being a survivalist and being able to live in the wild and off the grid. And it's just these amazing extremes that kind of boggle my mind. But I think we're all like finding our way, navigating our very heavily digitized world, right? And balancing that with real life physical experiences and real life physical relationships.
And that's a good way to be. That's I think the ultimate advice and takeaway is, find the balance. Don't be. I think the biggest thing when like pick up at the playground after school with my family is a lot of like moms in particular. We're in Wisconsin. There's more like opportunity to be as a stay-at-home mom, or parent and dads. And they'll say like, oh, so you study screen time, like, oh, you don't even want to know what the things that I have, like it's a deep dark secret that they're like plop their kid in front of game or an iPad, or we have Nintendo Switch, or those, like, it's, and I think
Like
my
it's a
biggest
confession or
takeaway,
something.
yeah. And the biggest takeaway for me on that is like, you need to not feel bad. I think that's, don't feel guilty. That's called responsibilization. Like, do not feel bad that your child is attracted to the the fabric of the culture of our society. And it's not just American society, and it's not just adult society, it's a kid society too. This is part of kids culture. Our kids will go around to different, especially in pandemic when we were kind of like easing up and they could play in each other's yards and garages, and they came home and they basically were popping between people's garages with their Amazon Alexas and making their own playlists. And then they would like have a cool name, like my son has like a robot playlist, and he's my robots. And then like obviously there's some cool parents because like on it it's Queen and like a Guns N' Roses song. So they were getting influenced, but they were using technology socially to share music, and and then kind of go between these other devices to do so in a very interesting, cool way. And that's their culture. It's Pokemon. They're collecting songs just like they could be collecting baseball cards or Pokemon cards, or rocks for that matter.
Nothing like a good old fashioned rock collection.
Yeah.
So, Maureen, I mean, this is just great. And I think it's really helpful and great messaging for parents to lose that sense of guilt and, what did you call it? Responsibilizing?
Responsibilization is the
Responsibilization.
British term with the Z. But yeah, this idea of, we're a culture where I think we have accumulated a lot of like guilt as parents. So, and honestly, my pushback is we don't have time for this as parents, all three of us included, to go like march picket lines to say we need better parental controls, or hey, platforms, you need to do better to label the content that you're putting up here for my kid on Netflix. But that what you can do is recognize, like, support the companies that are doing good things, that are supporting families. Support the companies like the nonprofits. I would like highlight Common Sense Media in this case, of a company that an organization rather, that is like kind of just keeping tabs on what sort of kids content and games and platforms are out there, and does some kind of honest reviews. And actually one thing I really like about them too is they have professional reviewers that review, and I have no affiliation with Common Sense Media, but, and then parent reviews, and then kids can review. And I think it's like recognizing like kids have agency too. Kids have rights. I've done a couple of publications on like children's digital rights. And with that comes like parents' rights. Like parents have a right to understand that like a platform will be safe for their kids, have a right to like not be scared to download an app. But even like just last year, United Nations, our United Nations, there's a committee on the rights of children. They adopted General Comment 25, which is on children's rights in relation to the digital environment, and basically acknowledged for the first time, like in writing, and also brought children, hundreds of children in to like write these words, but essentially to say that acknowledge that children have rights. And that digital devices should not be harmful. They shouldn't substitute for human interaction, but at the same time, like acknowledge that they should be done. It should be used appropriately, and that kids are relevant actors. That they should be taken into account with the research, with the digital technology, and that I think also just recognizing the fact that United Nations brought this to this level and to like put that into words kind of also shows like digital technology is not going anywhere, right? Like it's actually getting written into the code of how humanity should be treated. And I think one thing they say is the use of digital technology can help to realize children's participation at the local, national, and international levels. We should promote the awareness and access to digital means, and make sure that we're supporting kids equally to access that. Just today, May 13th, Jessica Rosenworthel, she's the FCC chairperson, the Federal Communications chairperson. She enacted a rule to maintain or create Wi-Fi on school buses, public school buses across the country, which would give kids potentially, especially in rural areas, 1 to 2 more hours of Wi-Fi access per day, so they could do their homework, so they could, do their research, do this sort of work on the way to and from school.
Wow.
There's probably close to zero chance that that's what they're going to be doing with the Wi-Fi, but yes, totally understand, approve.
I used to literally do my homework on the school bus. I was thinking about that. I was like, I shouldn't even say it. I'm such a nerd, but I did. But it's that much more of an access data point for that point of time. That it's a right that we need to do better in the U.S. to make sure kids do have broadband access. That those types of things. It's a start.
Yeah, I mean, access is such a huge part of what we're trying to bring to families and kids, right? Via the Toekenz platform. I guess I would just like to ask in closing, Maureen, do you have what kind of final advice would you have for parents who are navigating this new space, like I said, or who are interested in like trying out what we're doing on Toekenz or even other NFT platforms?
Yeah, I mean, NFTs and the kind of whole world of cryptocurrency and digital, this kind of digital DeFi world is brilliant and new. And it's, when you first approached me and when I was connected with you, I feel like I was really intimidated and scared as a parent first. Like, this is not like, it just sounds terrifying, right? Like this, I don't play in that world too much. And, and my first knee-jerk reaction was probably, well, why are we like getting kids involved with like Bitcoin? This is like, it's too much. Like this is already so overwhelming as a world. And as I've, I think I've become much more of a like come to learn and understand that this is just an opportunity. This world is happening, and the fact that me as an adult that I'm intimidated by it, like that doesn't help my child. Like that doesn't help them have better access to understanding this world. If I am preventing them from the accessibility from a potential learning platform, that doesn't move our society forward either. Like I'm prohibiting their world. And what I saw right away, especially in getting to work with you, is like it's an opportunity to actually do it the right way. To make sure that this is going to happen left or right. However, I think kids will start entering into NFTs and the opportunity to collect and share and quarrel within the dojo. Like there's all kinds of cool things and contribute to like a larger, greater good of it too. And there's so many cool chances to do it, and it's happening already. And there's so many adults that love it. And I really kind of reckon it to like baseball cards, like back in the day, like this opportunity to do these neat things. So if you do it right, it can be really, really special for a kid. And what I love about the company is that it's a way for parents and kids to do it together. So instead of like me being nervous about it, is like you're teaching kind of financial digital currency literacy at a kid level, which would be my learning level for this. I think that's what I need, right?
Right.
Like baby steps, little chunks to like understand what this world is. And it's important, like just like anything else. Like why not give anybody the access to like understanding the language around it, the currency, the opportunities, and then obviously just kind of the brands and the fun of collecting, then, why not do this? Like, this is not going to hurt. It's just a really cool opportunity to kind of play in this other sphere, and it's happening. So you might as well do it the right way. These are my philosophies. I like, all right, this is good.
Makes sense to me. Thank you so much, Maureen. Really appreciate you coming on today, sharing your research, your experience, your wisdom, and just your a common sense approach as a parent too. Like it's very helpful to us, very illuminating to me. So just on behalf of myself and Crypto Kitties, thank you so much. And Jeff, is there any final remarks or questions that you have?
Seconded. You said it very well. Maureen, great to meet you. Thank you for joining us. I hope we get to have you back.
Thank you for having me. This is great, and only good things to come.
Is there any where that people should find you or follow you, Maureen? Always like to give you an opportunity for that too.
Not properly. No, I'm Maureen Mauk with All Is Well Entertainment, and you can find me through Iris at this point, or through University of Wisconsin-Madison. Find me that way.
Sounds good. Thanks again, and yes, we'll definitely hope to have you back, Maureen.
All right, take care.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to our listeners out there. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Toekenz Podcast or follow us on social media. That's it for this one. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.